It all started with the shower screen. Not long after moving into our old house in a country town, I was vaguely aware that there were occasional weird clunking noises in the bathroom when I had a shower. And they weren't coming from me. One day while showering, I happened to catch the screen move and also discovered that it was this that made the clunky noise. It had moved about half an inch, even though it's not free swinging, if not fairly firmly seated on the edge of the bath. Although the window was open a notch to let the steam out, there wasn't enough wind to have moved the screen. I hadn't touched it either. Since then, there were a number of occasions where I witnessed it, and I had been much more aware of anything that might be the cause of this movement. But each time it moved completely by itself. Ooh. Another incident made me start to wonder. One day as we were going out, I noticed that the front window was open. Although the front of the house is right on the street, there are wrought iron bars on the window so nobody could get in, but I still didn't want people to be able to look in through the gap in the curtains. I went back inside and closed the window, assuming that my wife had mistakenly left it open since I couldn't remember opening it. 2 days later, it happened again. I reminded my wife to be careful not to leave it open, and she replied that she hadn't opened it. After repeated occasions over the following weeks, I was increasingly making sure that the handle was properly in the closed position. The thought that it might be due to vibrations from cars going past crossed my mind, but the road is narrow and they don't drive very fast in front of the house. Also, the handle is fairly solid, not difficult to turn, but firm enough that it would need very heavy vibrations to turn it, not to mention that it turns up to open. They'd be amazing vibrations to work against gravity. Finally, one evening I was working upstairs in my study before going to bed. My wife normally gave our baby girls their last bottle at about 11, so they would sleep the rest of the night. At a couple of minutes past 11, I heard her coming up the stairs and go into the kids' room. So I went down to the kitchen to make myself a hot cup of cocoa. Yes, I'm terribly old-fashioned, and okay, terribly old. I was therefore surprised to find my wife sitting at the kitchen table with the laptop. Yeah, I could have sworn I heard her very clearly coming up the stairs. The house was about 400 years old. The exterior walls were solid stone, around 2 feet thick. Vibrations would be almost impossible. We also certainly couldn't hear the neighbors. I don't know what ancient history was hidden within those walls. However, I was talking to a friend who had grown up in the town and happened to know the house well. Some years before, a couple bought the old house with the aim of completely renovating it. The place was gutted and the interior rebuilt. The husband created a big den on the far side of the house in which he planned to get on with his hobbies in peace and quiet when he was soon to retire. The day after finishing the renovation, the wife found him dead, still sitting upright in an armchair in the den. And yet it would seem there was no resting in peace. The wife began to see his face appear in all the mirrors, in particular the fixed mirror in the bathroom. Within 2 months, she couldn't stand it any longer and sold the house. The town where I lived is an ancient town in southern Spain, which has an interesting history. It is purported to be the site of the Battle of Munda, where the blood of around 30,000 Roman soldiers soaks the soil. Later, it became one of the last Muslim strongholds, the scene of some of the bloodiest confrontations with the Catholic armies. Hemingway was inspired by events in the Civil War where a mob threw people suspected of being fascists off the cliff, to write such a scene in his famous novel For Whom the Bell Tolls. And rather strangely, for what is such a strongly conservative Catholic town, I have counted at least 7 green men carvings above old doorways, a very much pagan symbol. Now, I'm one of the most skeptical persons when it comes to esoteric things, but every once in a while, something happens that gives me just a wee shiver down my spine. Check out my romantic comedy, loosely translated, set principally in Spain, and which gives a bit of a feel for the country, its history and people. If that sounds like your cup of tea, buy me a couple of beers. That's about how much the book costs, and you'll get that warm fuzzy feeling of helping out an indie author. Cheers. There's a link to the ebook on Amazon in the description below. I'm the Social Evolutionary. Peace on, or peace off.